Hello, Cage Siders. Welcome to, I don't know what this show is called exactly. Sean and Keith interview people, maybe. That's sketchy. It's your boy, Sean, and I am not with Gino. I'm with Keith Harris from across the pond, and we are here because we had an opportunity to interview Andy from Revolution Pro Wrestling, who Keith has been to a number of their shows. They're part of, I know there's a lot of wrestling out there now, and it's, even if you're dying to keep up with all the good stuff, it's hard to, but they are one of a couple of people making some waves in the UK. They have a streaming service, and we'll plug all that stuff at the end, but that's sort of the framework. They're also doing some shows next month that even somebody who hasn't kept up with them as much as I would like knows. They've got some nice matchups coming up with New Japan at their Global War shows. I'm particularly looking forward to Ishii versus Hero, but there's a lot of good stuff there that we're going to talk about. So,
hi, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks for making the time to talk to us.
Anytime.
Yeah. So maybe I should start off with a question. So how did your relationship with New Japan sort of start off and grown into this relationship where you bring over not their whole roster, but maybe 8 or 10 guys from New Japan and have these sort of super shows together in the UK?
Yeah, well, I think that might be my most asked question. So it is quite a topical answer. The answer is really the whole thing started when we brought over Jushin Liger in 2013, June 2013. That was our first bit of interaction with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Obviously, we've always brought over top international names, and Jushin Liger was no different. He's someone that we'd wanted to get for a long while, and he's someone that a lot of people within British wrestling had tried to get for a very long while. And we were able to make that relationship with New Japan through Fergal Devitt, who's obviously Finn Balor now, and he was our cruiserweight champion at the time, and we'd worked for a long time alongside him. And he was a regular character on our shows, kind of between his visits to New Japan Pro Wrestling. I guess very similar to Will Ospreay at the moment, when he comes and does our shows between his New Japan tours. Yeah, he kind of brokered the deal. He did all the introductions, and the show went well. Jushin Liger enjoyed himself, had a great time. It was our first show we actually did in York Hall, and then kind of from that point, without going into a long detail, the relationship just kind of blossomed from there. And it's really something that if you just look at our shows over the past few years, you can see yourselves, there's no need to read anything into it, you can see yourselves how the relationship's grown and evolved. We started bringing off one guy over, then two, and then obviously we've got it to the stage now where we've kind of set up these what now look to be annual Global Wars UK events where we bring over multiple members of the roster all at one time. But that's not to say we're still bringing over guys kind of between those shows as well. So it's a really healthy relationship, and the fact that we have a long-standing relationship with them means that we're able to do a lot more interesting things, and the shows don't just have to be I guess let's just say exhibitions. They don't need to be that. They're already on the first night you've got Zack Sabre Jr. versus Shibata, which is obviously a rematch from the match they had at Summer Sizzler. So they've now got a whole nother story to tell based off of their previous encounter, and it means that we can follow up on matches because we have got that relationship there with New Japan. So that's pretty much where we're at now, and pretty much how it started.
Well, I think a lot of people were, surprised that actually Zack Sabre Jr. Defeated Shibata in their first match together. So that's quite an interesting, I suppose, an interesting thing to play off, and in the rematch whether Shibata can get his win back.
Absolutely, it's all about telling stories at the end of the day, and I think anyone who watched that match wanted to see a rematch, and it was almost like they teased us with what they could do, and the match is not like the match was short by any stretch of the imagination. I think it went 15-20 minutes, but at the end of it you wanted to see him go another 15 minutes, and it was just a real engrossing contest, and and it's almost set the scene perfectly for a rematch at this November's Global Wars show.
So maybe we should talk about some of the highlights over the past year for Revolution Pro, and I think you really kicked off the year in high gear. You know, Marty Scurll versus Will Ospreay, I think, is still one of the best matches I've seen live this year, and I've been to a lot of shows. I've also gone over to see SummerSlam and NXT. So it's still really up there and could be the best match I've seen live all this year. And also, you had a really special moment of AJ Styles' last match with one of his last matches before debuting with WWE, dropping the British Heavyweight Championship to Zack Sabre Jr. and then sort of teasing that he would enter the Royal Rumble. And I can remember that you know, Twitter went a bit wild that night, you know, and I think we picked up on it over here at Cage Side Seats. So talk a bit about that event, and you know how maybe a bit about using AJ Styles as British Heavyweight Championship and how that helped put Revolution Pro on the map.
Well, I guess it's a kind of a multi-part question, but I guess in terms of that event, high stakes, again, with every event we do, we try to create moments that people are going to remember for a long time to come. And there's a lot of iconic moments that you can kind of pull out throughout our history, and specifically our York Hall shows, because it's just such an iconic venue, and it's a real, it's almost a perfect setting for big matches and for big moments. So, you know, even dating back to the first show we had, where we had Jushin Liger, Prince Devitt and Rollerball Rocco stood side by side for a picture with a Revolution Pro Cruiserweight Championship belt. That was a great moment. Another show, we had Bret Hart and Hiroshi Tanahashi stood side by side, as you had the best wrestler of his generation in Bret Hart, standing side by side with the best wrestler in the world, Hiroshi Tanahashi, you know, and time really stood still with that moment. And there's just so many different moments like that. And of course, the AJ Styles goodbye to independent professional wrestling ranks up there with the best of them, and it really was a special moment, and it was great. I mean, it was 1 week later he was in the Royal Rumble, so it was quite something. In terms of the event itself, it was just, again, like when we have the shows in York Hall, there's just that big fight atmosphere in the air, and I think everyone was going to be excited about AJ Styles versus Zack Sabre Jr., and then out of nowhere, Will Ospreay and Marty Scurll just stole the show, and for Will and Marty, I know that was a big deal for them, and both had previously main evented against AJ Styles, and both had previously stolen the show in a triple threat match with AJ Styles, and this was them on their own doing the exact same thing, and that was a rematch from a great match which is available for free on YouTube, which they did at the London Cockpit, and yeah, the second time round, they just absolutely smashed it out the park again, and it had that big fight atmosphere, and it was in that, you know, the historic York Hall, and just everything just kind of came together on that night, you know, and like their timing, the crowd, you know, everything came together on that night, and that was a real special match. In regards to AJ Styles, having him as a champion was a real honor. I mean, I think it's no coincidence in my mind that our string of sellout shows at York Hall really began when AJ Styles came in. We hadn't sold out a show until we'd come close several times to selling out York Hall, which is 1,200 seats, which obviously per independent standards is a big building. And we'd come close several times, but it wasn't until we started using AJ that we started selling out. And selling out consistently, and I don't think that's any coincidence at all, because and I believe he still is right now, but when he was wrestling for us and was a champion, you know, without a doubt he was the best wrestler in the world at that time. He always brought his A game, and he was able to mix it up with the best guys in the UK. I mean, he had a string from his first match in was against Will Ospreay, and then from that point on, he won the belt against Marty Scurll, and then he just had a string of great championship defenses, and and really it kind of created a chapter in our history, and it put a lot of eyeballs on the product. And obviously, at the time, we didn't know he was going to wind up in WWE at the time. We just thought we had the best wrestler in the world, wrestling some of the best wrestling matches you're going to see, you know, in this country live, you know, and we knew every time AJ wrestled, it was a special occasion. So, and I think all the fans knew that as well, which is again, goes back to, you know, every time he was on, you know, the numbers, you know, the tickets sold very quickly every single time an AJ Styles match was announced. And I think as a result, you know, like, I think the fact that he wound up in WWE, it kind of, in many ways, it was great for us because it added even more eyeballs onto our product. And anytime I use an import, that's ultimately the main goal. Like, obviously, we want great matches. Obviously, we want them to teach our guys something that they may not have known. And I'm not saying that imports are better than our wrestlers. I'm saying that every single territory you wrestle, you pick up something new. And you know, when our guys get to wrestle guys who've wrestled all over the place, you know, it gives them an opportunity to learn, and perhaps the imports then learn off of our guys as well. But, you know, there's nothing better than our wrestlers testing themselves against the best wrestlers in the world. But, you know, with AJ winding up in WWE, it means that people now might go back and watch an AJ Styles versus Mark Haskins match or versus Will Ospreay match. And then when they're watching that match, A, they might like their opponent, and B, they'll give the rest of the show a try, and then they might spot a Josh Bodum or a Trent Seven, or, you know, any of the other guys who are on our roster. And I think that's what's so important. And it certainly did a great deal. And also, looking back at the lineage of our championship, it's added a great deal of credibility to that belt as well.
Well,
I wonder, I'm sorry, go ahead, Keith.
Go ahead, Scott. Sean.
Okay, I was just going to ask, building off of that, I mean, I think it's interesting in today's wrestling market, you know, where a lot of stuff is moment driven, and, you know, the gifts of a match are almost as important as the match itself. How do you balance, you know, creating those moments with telling longer form stories for Rev Pro?
Well, I think it is ultimately all about the longer term story, and I think that it's, you know, it's at the end of the day, like, a York Hall card is a 7-match card, so I always try to give everyone a little bit of everything. You know, it's almost like a buffet of different wrestling styles, and it's just a case of getting that balance right. And every now and again, yes, you will have that match, which is that iconic moment, that exhibition, which doesn't necessarily play into a story, but as long as you've got an undercurrent of stuff which is telling a story as well, then I think you're ticking all the boxes. And for me, that's very important, to make sure that yes, it is important to deliver those moments, but ultimately, what draws people back is the stories you're telling. Now, what I find very interesting about our shows is that we've got kind of a small base of fans that follow the storylines religiously, but we've got the wider outside base of fans. And don't get me wrong, we're a niche. I know we're a niche, but we've got a wider base of outside fans who are more attracted to those big matches, you know, who want to come for your Kurt Angle versus Zack Sabre Jr.'s, who want to come for, you know, your AJ Styles versus Will Ospreay's or whatever have you. You know, they want to see those big matches. But, you know, the core of Revolution Pro Wrestling, the wrestling promotion which runs shows all the time consistently, has an undercurrent of storylines that if you want to follow, you can. And it's not like again, like, you can go to a show, like our York Hall shows are kind of like our kind of our marquee events, our kind of pay-per-views, so to speak, without actually being pay-per-views. But that's what the York Hall shows are like. And then throughout, we have an undercurrent of events going. You know, we have monthly shows at a venue called the London Cockpit. We run shows in Portsmouth Guildhall and all over the place, and Sittingbourne, and we run those shows, and that's where you can follow the storylines and really invest in it. But if you go to York Hall and you don't know the storylines, it doesn't matter. You can still enjoy and appreciate the show for what it is, a standalone show.
Well, part of the difficulty today is that there is just so much content out there, and it's great for a promoter with all this technology advancements, with broadband, fast broadband, beyond demand services, streaming services. but it's also more difficult maybe to get fans full attention to watch, let's say, everything of your promotion has. So it's sort of I think a balance has to be struck. So how do you try and meet that balance?
Well, really, by not having complicated storylines. So, you know, nothing needs to so basically, if we put together something where, if you, again, like I say, the main thing is that you can go to a show with having no outside knowledge whatsoever of what's gone on, and you can enjoy the match on a base level, and we deliver that, you know, high quality of entertainment, and having a strong in-ring product is very important for that very reason as well. Because if you've got a strong in-ring product, then people appreciate the wrestling. Now, if people do follow the storylines, then that's great, because they can get a deeper understanding and a deeper meaning of what we're showing. I think a lot of people say about Rev Pro shows, you know, oh, there's not really any storylines, or, you know, because they think it is just the York Hall shows. But I genuinely believe that that's just a product of, like you say, there being so much wrestling available at the moment. And something that we could do better is condensing those storylines down into music videos and packages that we can play before the matches, or on YouTube, or whatever have you. Unfortunately, Revolution Pro Wrestling at the moment is just myself running it, and it becomes a matter of time and growing this thing, you know. So it's kind of you know, as we kind of expand and continue to grow, that's what we would love to be able to do, and that's something that you can look forward to in the future. But really, having a high in-ring product means that you know, you don't have to be able to understand the storylines to come and enjoy the shows, and that means that it kind of eliminates that problem of you know, the fans who don't have time to watch everything we've got. But then likewise, with our on-demand service now, we're just about getting caught up with everything. You know, you can go back and you can watch for example, all the Cockpit shows are up there. You can watch those and see the storylines develop, and then you can kind of then gain your appreciation for it. Ultimately, we'd like to get the Cockpit shows up in the same speed we get the York Hall shows up, so no one misses a beat, essentially. So like, you know, if you're going to a show, then it's just a case of pop this show on, you know, the week before you go, and then you'll be kind of all up to speed about where you are.
So just to explain to maybe the American listeners, so the Cockpit, isn't it like a small 100-seat like theatre? Because I actually went not to a Revolution Pro Wrestling event, but one of my friends was in a play there, and so that was the first time I went to the arena about maybe a month or two ago. So I would be very interested to know how it seems like too small for actually to just put a ring in it almost. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Cockpit. So we use our 16-foot ring in the Cockpit, which is if you watch the earlier York Hall shows, this is a ring that was used there. And obviously, that's a comment we always get about British wrestling. Why are the rings so small? The answer to that question is because buildings are normally very small in the UK. Now we've actually upgraded, and we have an 18-foot ring that we use on our York Hall shows now, and we've been using it since the Kurt Angle show. So we've had 3 York Hall shows with the 18-foot ring now, and that's kind of the ring we're going to be using in our bigger venues moving forward. But back to your question, with the Cockpit, it's a 180-seat building. It has tiers on all 4 sides of the ring. So I'm not sure what the setup would have been when you went to see it, but like for the wrestling, we have tiered seating on all 4 sides of the ring. And we only go back about 4 or 5 rows on each side, but you're literally sat right on top of the action. So it's an absolutely perfect, it's an intimate venue for pro wrestling. But like, you know, I get just as much of the buzz out of those shows as I do with the York Hall shows, because it's such a unique environment. And the wrestlers love wrestling there, because it's just, it's something else. It really is. And we've had so many great matches at the Cockpit. I mean, a recent one, which I'd urge anyone to go out their way to check on rpwondemand.com. At the last show we had at the Cockpit, we had a British Heavyweight Championship match between Zack Sabre Jr. and Trent Seven, which was really something else. But we've had so many great matches like that. And it's just a perfect environment for wrestling. If I could liken it to anything, it'd be kind of like the old studio style wrestling, you know, that you used to get. I'd liken it to that a little bit, but yeah, so it's so intense, it's so intimate, and like I say, it's just a great venue for wrestling. The walls are right behind the back row of seats, which lends to absolutely perfect acoustics, and obviously you've got the theatre lights, which adds to the atmosphere, and it's just it really is a great experience for live pro wrestling.
I was just going to make the analogy to studio wrestling, and you took the words out of my mouth there. So maybe going into maybe a different direction. So obviously Will Ospreay has been super important to your promotion, and I was struck after he won the Best of the Super Juniors tournament, just the sort of homecoming hero reaction he got, which felt really genuine and sort of a special moment for British wrestling, and you know, and I think just a special moment to be there for live. So how important is Will Ospreay to Revolution Pro Wrestling?
Well, he's very important to Revolution Pro Wrestling. I mean, he's obviously, again, one of the top talents in the world right now. He offers something completely different to any other wrestler. He's unique. He was obviously very charismatic, but like really, I think that the reaction that Will Ospreay received was a testament to the hard work he's put in throughout I say the years, but he's only been in wrestling for a very short time. But in that time, he's really grown as a performer in front of the crowd, and he's really been on a journey with the crowd, and it was almost like a validation for him. And I don't think he was expecting a huge reaction like that. I was expecting a big reaction, but not that big. You know, that was something else. And that was just another example of those moments which are created at these shows, and it's really something that you can't replicate anywhere else. You know, it's you have to be like, it's great to watch it back, and obviously the footage still gives me goosebumps when I watch it back now, but you know, being there live is just something else. But yeah, like Will is he's an integral part of a Revolution Pro Wrestling roster. But you know, like in saying that, you know, there's so many other guys who you could say the exact same thing about, and there's so many other guys who are coming through that you will be saying the exact same thing about as well. So the way I explain British wrestling and Revolution Pro Wrestling at the moment is it's just a very exciting time, because you've got so many guys who are hitting their stride and in their prime. You've got guys who, you know, like when I first started in 2006, 2005, maybe a bit earlier, there were guys who were breaking through. Like when I say breaking through, there were guys who were at trainee level, and I'm talking guys like a Shah Samuels or a Martin Stone. You know, a little couple of years later, you had Zack Sabre Jr., Marty Scurll. Those guys just kind of breaking through, and they were still boys at that time, you know, but they had a passion for it, and they had a clear talent, and they've been around for so many years now that they've just absorbed everything. They're now veterans of the UK scene, of the rest of the wrestling world, and like really, when you look at guys who are, you know, if you look at like the Stone Cold Steve Austins of, you know, how long he was on the indies before he wound up in WCW as an example, I think it was only a few years, you know, and many guys like that, they were only on the indies for a couple of years until they kind of, you know, found the big league, so to speak. But these guys have been toiling for all those years. Now they're kind of hit their prime. They're now no longer boys, they're men. They've, you know, changed their physiques, bodies, appearances. They're sure of who they are as characters, and really they've hit their own stride. But what you need to understand is that the landscape of British wrestling back then was so different to what it is now. It was so much less welcoming. It was so much harder to come through. There was almost a battle, an internal battle going on between the old school mentality of British wrestling and this new school mentality of British wrestling. And so there was all those minefields that they had to, that people had to navigate their way through if they were going to make it in the wrestling industry. But now it's so much more welcoming. And then I think that's as a result, that's a product of guys like Will Ospreay and those guys who are kind of, you know, the new guys who are coming through, who rather than, you know, having to figure it out for themselves, they've got people to give them a helping hand. You know, those young veterans who realized they didn't like the way they were treated when they were brought in, you know, they're not going to treat anyone else like that, you know, and it's really a very different industry and than it ever has been. And I think that's kind of really in many ways led to British wrestling flourishing so much, and you know, and seeing our guys going out across the world, and people taking notice.
Well, to follow on from that, it sort of, it boggles the mind how insanely young some of the talent is, like a Pete Dunn and a Tyler Bate and maybe other wrestlers like that who are so good despite being maybe like in their early 20s. I think Tyler Bate is still 19, and it's just amazing how quickly some of these wrestlers come on.
Yeah, well, there's guys who are like abnormalities. So let's say like a Tyler Bates, like a freak, or Will Ospreay's a freak. You know, guys like that who just get it straight away, you know. But then there's guys like Pete Dunn, for example. Pete Dunn's been around for years, despite the fact, obviously, like he's still young in professional wrestling. He's been around for a long time. And again, he's like, that's just an example of, he's kind of probably the next generation on from your, you know, like your Marty Scurlls and Zack Sabre Juniors. Pete's probably your next generation of those guys who've been almost under the radar, like coming through. But with Pete, obviously, his was a very conscientious decision to completely change his style, completely change his look, to transform his body, and deliver something different. And that's kind of what drew people's attention from Pete. But Pete's just an example of a young veteran of the UK scene. And I think that's what's so great. You know, all these guys who've been working for reasonably short amounts of time, all these guys who've been kind of working for a long time, but you know, have been developing, you know, whilst they've been doing it. Now they come and they're like a breath of fresh air, because, you know, they're not kind of on trainee shows or undercards anymore. Now people are starting to take notice of them.
And I think, for example, with Pete Dunne, it's been noticeable. So I probably first saw him wrestle in Sheffield maybe 18 months ago, 2 years ago. And, you know, just the confidence he seems to have now as a character and the presence he has, he's just come on leaps and bounds.
Absolutely. And what you find normally is guys like that, you know, who are sponges, who absorb stuff from people around them. The better they get, the more people take notice, and the more promoters take notice, and the better talent they book them against. The better talent they work, the more they can absorb off of the talent they're working, and as a result, the better they get still. And then that kind of then knocks on to giving them more confidence, and it just grows and grows and grows and snowballs. And then all of a sudden we're left with, you know, Pete Dunne where he is right now, and Will Ospreay where he is right now, and guys like that, you know. And I think that's the key, really. It's just there's a real great sense of development in the UK wrestling scene. And what's also really exciting is that there are a number of guys who are kind of in a position like Pete Dunne was, like all those years ago, who are extremely talented, who are sponges, who are great at learning and excited about learning, and they're really starting to show signs of potential. And if they keep their heads in the game, and they stay switched on, then they could wind up in very high places. And British wrestling is in very safe hands.
So how important do you think social media is for wrestlers today, in terms of people finding out about them, people learning that they're having great matches, maybe like, you know, in front of, let's say, a few hundred people, and, you know, then maybe promoters hearing about it through word of mouth and things like that? So how important is social media for wrestlers and to you as a promoter?
It's very important, because obviously, if you think how hard it was, I mean, even if you look back to when I first started running shows, the internet was a thing, but it wasn't really, it was nowhere near as widely accepted. And I remember like quite clearly, and you still hear this argument today, but you quite clearly, like you had the FWA, who were really the first promotion in the UK, the original incarnation of the FWA, who were the first promotion in the UK to take advantage of the internet. And as a result, you'd have angry, bitter British wrestlers who'd be like, oh, you know, that internet promotion, the FWA, you know, they're not a proper promotion, you know, they only draw internet fans, like almost disdainfully, you know, and that kind of kept going. But really, the crazy thing was that as it kept going and that disdain was still there, and they were, you know, slagging off the internet and social media and whatever have you, you know, whilst that, and in looking at internet fans so disdainfully, which I never understood. But whilst all that was going on, meanwhile, pretty much the entire nation got the internet. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, and all FWA was ahead of the curve in recognizing that the internet was a great tool that they could use. And why wouldn't you use that tool? You know, why would you not use a tool which could effectively be used to promote your product? So to me, the internet is an absolutely massive tool. And you can reach such a wider base of people. I mean, I guess back in the day, you could only rely on the local people. You know, your local towns could only rely on, you know, people within that town. But now we have people traveling across the country, traveling across Europe, or in some instances, traveling across the world to see our shows. That just wouldn't have been possible without the internet. And without social media. And I just think it's really important. It's also opened up, obviously, new revenue streams like our on-demand service and people able to buy merchandise and, you know, all that stuff. You know, so I can't speak any more positively about social media. I think that it's an absolutely great tool. Don't get me wrong, it can be a terrible tool if people don't know how to use it properly and have no kind of, should we say, social awareness. But, you know, there's no different to the way you conduct yourself in real life. So yeah, I can't say enough positive things about social media.
Well, so social media even sort of can impact on storylines in shows, as we maybe have seen with Vader versus Will Ospreay, after Vader criticised the GIF which featured Ospreay. So just to get into your mindset for booking that match, was it partly to maybe generate internet headlines, get press that you wouldn't have done otherwise, you know, because it's something that I think with fans have been a bit controversial, but it definitely paid off in terms of another sold out Your Call event.
Absolutely. And I think that with any, again, it depends what way you're looking at it from, but ultimately, I wouldn't have booked the match if I didn't think it could sell tickets. And it sold tickets. So that's why the match was booked. Therefore, it was a success in that respect. It generated a lot of headlines. It put eyeballs on the product. So it was a success in that respect. You know, like at the end of the day, I can't even understate, how hard it is to generate interest and to sell tickets for wrestling shows. When there's so much product out there and there's so much stuff going on, anytime I get an opportunity or I fall into something where we can do some business and we can do some good business, you know, I'm going to jump on it. And was it a risk? Yes, it was. But did it pay off? Yes, it did. Ultimately, my job as a promoter is to fill buildings. And that's what we did. And then it wasn't just that. Obviously, it put eyes on the product. It grew our social media numbers. It increased numbers on our mailing list, which again is so important to any kind of business, you know. And the fact that it did all that stuff can only be seen as a positive. And I'm sure I mentioned earlier, you know, if people come to see those guys, and then whilst they're watching it, you know, they then see, you know, a Josh Bodum or, you know, a Pete Dunn or whoever, you know, and they then become fans of those guys, and then is a very big positive to the industry. I know for a fact there were a number of fans who kind of attended our shows on a semi-regular basis who were put off by that match and therefore decided to boycott the show and not attend, which I never really understood myself, because as I said time and time again, it's a 7-match show. And the card, I think you'll find it hard to argue the card itself that we delivered underneath that match. Any single one of those other 6 matches could have been main events anywhere in the world, and you know, every single one provided a different style. So if you didn't like that match and didn't want to see that match, then hey, maybe Zack Sabre Jr. versus Jeff Cobb could float your boat, or maybe Marty Scurll versus Chris Heroes for you, you know. So we had all those different matches underneath, which were some real great matches. But the point I was making with those was, you know, like yes, there were some fans that were turned off, but we created a lot of new fans, a lot of first-time fans, a lot of fans who came to York Hall to see wrestling for the first time, and a lot of fans who had never seen a Revolution Pro Wrestling show before, and a lot of fans who walked away Revolution Pro Wrestling fans. You know, it's all about growing at the end of the day, and it's all about making more people aware. Essentially, that added, you know, that was a 3rd show in 3 months we'd ran in York Hall. The 2nd show was 34 tickets short of a sellout. The 1st and 3rd shows both sold out with 1,200 people at the shows. So to me, that's you know, that's some good business, and that's something that I wouldn't even dream was possible before. You know, we were running 3 shows a year at York Hall. We ran 3 shows in 3 months. I think there was 6 or 7 weeks between the 3 shows in total. You know, so it was some good business, and it opened a lot of eyes to a product.
Well, I wouldn't say I boycotted the show, but for me personally,
you boycotted the show, didn't you? Wow!
Damn it, Keith.
I didn't. Well, it was tough for me living in Sheffield to come for 3 shows to London in such a short amount of time. But maybe it was sort of one of those things that the Vader Osprey didn't appeal to me, but maybe on the day of the show when like other friends of mine were going, I was thinking maybe I should have gone. But,
yeah, you should. There you go. So that's, I think that's, but in all seriousness, and again, like, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but a lot of people genuinely had that mentality, and it was like a weird show. And I'm not saying that was your mentality, and like you say, I completely appreciate that not everyone could get to 3 shows in a row. We've got the on-demand service. Everything goes up really quickly. You can see stuff very soon after. And I appreciate that, you know, it was a big ask asking fans to come to 3 shows within 3 months. And I think that's what makes it even more impressive, the fact that it was able to sell out well in advance of the show. But again, like I say, like, it's at the end of the day, it's a 7-match card. If you go to any kind of pop concert, as an example, you're not going to like every single song that the band sings, even though you may love the band, you know, but overall you go to be entertained. And if you like 9 out of 10 songs, then I consider that to be a great night. So to me, I think that was the exact same mentality with that Vader and Will show. And it was something that everyone was talking about, everyone wanted to see, everyone wanted to be involved with. And the atmosphere on the night was something else. It was a real electric atmosphere, like real emotion. And it had people talking. And when was the last time that, you know, a wrestling match really conveyed real genuine emotion from people? You know, it was a spectacle. And don't get me wrong, you know, was it a 5-star classic? No, it wasn't, but it was something. It created moments that people will be talking about for a long time.
Well, I did watch it back, and I think it was probably a testament to Will Ospreay and to whoever maybe helped him, you know, lay the match out, how good it was. I was shocked at how good it was, considering Vader's age and, well, shape he's in at the moment.
Hey, this is one thing as well, and again, like, another reason why I kind of put out the feelers for this match as well, and bear in mind, like, when this all first happened, I never went anywhere near it. and I didn't touch it, and I thought it was as silly as probably you thought when you decided to boycott it. But I'm sorry, but I kind of let it rest, and then and I thought it would blow over after a couple of days, but it didn't. The media attention intensified, and obviously it brought up all these debates, and everyone was talking about it, and it built more and more and more momentum, and again kind of snowballed. And I kind of spoke to Will and said, "Do you want to do this?" He was the one who wanted to do the match, and he was adamant he wanted to do it. And my mentality was, someone's going to do it. Someone is going to do it, and I wanted to make sure it was done properly. And I kind of had faith in myself being able to deliver it in a proper way. And myself and Will obviously laid everything out, and it pretty much came out exactly as we thought it would. And obviously it could have gone anyway, but like in my head, like it went perfectly, you know, and there's nothing more satisfying than that. And I think that it was, you know, I think it was really important that it was done properly, because, you know, I think that it very easily could have gone the other way.
Oh, definitely, and maybe we might see that in WWE, an example where it could go either way with Brock Lesnar versus Bill Goldberg, which is, you know, obviously Goldberg isn't quite as old as Vader, but he hasn't had a match in 12 years' time. So that's definitely a storyline that will need to be handled carefully.
I'm sure they've got the right people to kind of put something together that people want to see, and I have every confidence in them. But you know, I think that's again for those guys, that's a great piece of business. It's going to get people talking, and hopefully for those guys, it's going to draw some old fans back into the product. And I just hope that when they do it, again in a similar vein to, I'm not comparing myself to WWE in any way, shape, or form. I don't want it to come across as that at all. But in a similar way to, I loaded up the Vader Osprey show. I hope that WWE takes advantage of the fact that they've got this match, which is going to get all this attention and draw fans from who perhaps aren't fans of a current product. And I hope they put on, you know, a real hot show underneath, which will hopefully, you know, keep some of the fans, you know, and hopefully it's not just a kind of, you know, a one-off boost for them with that match. I hope that Brock Lesnar and Bill Goldberg is everything that everyone wants to see and more. But equally, I hope that, you know, that whoever else is on that show, Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho and Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns and Rusev and all those guys from the Raw side, I think it's a joint pay-per-view as well. So, you know, I hope the AJ Styles and Dean Ambrose and whatever, I hope all those guys can steal the show. And I hope that coming out of it, everyone's like, oh, bloody hell, that AJ Styles is good. Let's watch SmackDown, you know, or I want to see where this Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins story is going. Let's watch Raw. You know, I hope that WWE can capitalize on that.
Well, the hotter the business is, the better it is for everyone else, yeah, who's promoting wrestling.
I wonder, Andy, you've talked a lot about how bringing guys in from other countries and other promotions, you know, helps the guys that work with you more often learn what goes on in other territories and different skills and things like that. Do you talk to other promoters and bookers that way? Are there guys that you look to try to see what they're doing and keep up with them or follow their innovations?
Yeah, I just try to watch as much wrestling as possible. I think that's. I know it's kind of hard, and there's stuff that I kind of only watch bits and pieces of. But if anyone, I'll go out my way to, you know, have stuff recommended to me, and kind of get on anything which is kind of recommended as must watch viewing. But yeah, like I say, I just try and keep on top of the industry in general. And yes, I read the Wrestling Observer and you know, look at you know, like, I think it's important that anyone within the wrestling business does, purely because obviously of all the business metrics which are kind of released in that. But you know, like if I see like kind of names keep popping up or whatever, I'll make sure I go out my way to watch them. And I just think that that's one of the most important things, to stay on top, and also to watch a lot of historical stuff as well. Like I think that's really important, because I think that you can learn so much from historical stuff, and also you can steal a lot of ideas from historical stuff, because you know, like what's old is new and all that. But I think that's also very important. But just to immerse yourself in as much as possible, I think that's a big key.
Cool. I'm also wondering, I guess along those lines too, a lot of the guys, I mean, somebody like Will, or there's a lot of reports now that maybe they're going to be using Marty Scurll a lot more. Do you have any relationship with Ring of Honor through New Japan or anything, or is it just? Well,
at the moment we're on very friendly terms, I'd say.
Okay.
There's not an official relationship as such, but I kind of hope that there can be, and I'm sure there can be in the future. I mean, we use a lot of Ring of Honor talent. Speak to the Ring of Honor guys on probably a semi-regular basis, I'd say. Lines of communication have kind of been very open recently, and I think that, you know, from both sides there's a willingness and eagerness to work with one another, and I think it makes sense. You know, we both work with New Japan Pro Wrestling. We both, you know, care very much about presenting a high standard, a high quality of pro wrestling, and even from its most basic level, even from a scheduling standpoint, especially now, you know, you've got Marty Scurll and Will Ospreay going over, you know, I think it's important that we can kind of be on the same page, and, you know, like if we need guys on certain dates, or they need guys, you know, like we can kind of work together and make it happen, really.
What about CMLL? Would you be interested in maybe getting some Mexican wrestlers? Obviously, New Japan and CMLL have a relationship too. So
yeah, like absolutely. I think for me, like wrestling is an international thing, and like what, you know, I get there's a strong sense of British pride, and everyone loves to see the British guys doing so well, and everyone loves a show which is full of Brits. Now, for what I don't get is sometimes I get a bit of stick from people saying, you know, like, oh, you know, you're too dependent on international talent. You know, I personally disagree with that, because I look at wrestling as very much an international thing. It's an international language, and if we can bring different styles from across the world, the best wrestlers from all over the world together, then I think that the only real winners are the fans. And in line with that, we're able to deliver with us being so much product going on. By using people from around the world, we're able to deliver very unique one-off situations, which, you know, you probably wouldn't even dream of being possible. And we're able to do that because of that kind of almost, you know, open-minded mentality. And I would say as well, for everyone who says, you know, like, oh, well, why are they using so many imports? No one was saying that when PWG brought over all the Brits. Do you know what I mean? So like, you know, you can't have it both ways, you know. But at the end of the day, for me, like, nationality is not important. The most important thing for me is using the best wrestlers in the world. And when we have foreign wrestlers come over, treating them as if they're our own as well, which is why we're able to establish, you know, relationships with wrestlers and use guys on a semi-regular basis. You know, like you see Ricochet consistently works for us, as an example of an American who's kind of made a home away from home with us, you know, and I hope we can do that with a number of other talents. And I think that, again, them working alongside British wrestlers really it helps those guys up their game as well.
Well, to bring it full circle, you know, sort of Global Wars UK, you know, the upcoming shows has got some very unique matches, sort of dream matches for indie fans, like Marty Scurll versus Jushin Liger, the first time ever. Tomohiro Ishii against both Chris Hero and Dunn. So, you know, I think for independent wrestling fans, particularly in the UK, they are dream matches to the hardcore fans. And, we're grateful to have the opportunity to watch them live.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's something that's so special about those shows as well, is the fact that and again, this is probably an overused phrase of myself, but I just want people to understand the magnitude of the situation. The guys from New Japan Pro Wrestling is obviously the second biggest wrestling company in the world, and the guys you're seeing are some of the best wrestlers in the world. And I think for so many years, British wrestling was able to, when you're looking at guys on a stature basis, British wrestling was brilliant, getting guys in, and this is going back many years, but getting guys in who are at the tail end of their careers or living off a WWE gimmick, and they weren't in their primes. But what we're getting is the best wrestlers in the world in the primes of their careers. I'm not sure everyone really appreciates how lucky they are, because I'm sure in years from now, we're going to look back on these days and think how lucky we were, because, when I first brought over Hiroshi Tanahashi as an example, I likened it to what it would be like if you could get John Cena into this country in his prime, working for an independent wrestling promotion, because that really is kind of how big it is. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Tanahashi is obviously anywhere near the name value of John Cena, but like in terms of standpoint, in terms of like what he can do in the ring, and in terms of how big a deal he is in Japan, he really is their John Cena. He's turned around and helped turn around an entire business, and we were seeing him in the prime of his career, and I think that's something that we can all look back on fondly, and we'll be able to. And obviously this Global Wars weekend enables us the opportunity to do that again with again some of the best wrestlers, period, and being able to put them in those unique matches which people may not have had the chance to see before, and also to open up the wrestling world's eyes to our guys and the talent they have, and really that's how Will Ospreay wound up with his job in New Japan Pro Wrestling for our Global War shows last year, and I think that's an opportunity for all our wrestlers again to stand up, be noticed, and be counted.
Maybe something else we should mention is that you also run events outside of London. So one which is coming up fairly soon is a show in Portsmouth. I'm not quite sure of the exact date, but you're having Ryback in a handicap match against the Legion of Lords, which is a very amusing duo, maybe underrated wrestling skills too. So how did maybe that come about, and talk about the diversity of the shows you do.
Okay, well, I guess were you one of the people that hated Ryback being announced as well?
No, I love that. I'm
just messing.
No, that was me on that score. Sorry.
Oh, really? Wow, I'm being ganged up on here. Okay, so no, again, like you say, I think that's the key word you use there, is the diversity of shows we run, and this is a big example of it. The show's Sunday, October the 30th from the Portsmouth Guildhall, which is a magnificent venue. It's really a central hub. Anyone in Portsmouth knows where it is. It's had wrestling there for dating back years and years and years, and talking like the glory days of wrestling, in this country. So it's a wonderful site for pro wrestling. Really, the shows are kind of framed a little differently to our the shows we run at York Hall, as an example, in the sense that they're very much targeted towards families, like family-orientated shows, and it's not to say, and we run different levels of shows in Portsmouth. We've obviously got our training school in Portsmouth, and many people who've gone to our shows at the London Cockpit will have seen them on rpwondemand.com, will have realised we open up the shows with a contenders match, which features wrestlers from our Portsmouth School of Wrestling. So we also run contenders shows in Portsmouth, which are a great entry level show for our guys to come in and work in front of a family crowd, in essence. Now the shows at the Portsmouth Guildhall are an extension upon that. However, we make sure we use we use our same ethos of using the best wrestlers in the world and the best wrestlers in the country, and it kind of is almost if any of our contenders are on the shows, it's a big step up for them to see if they can hang in that environment. Now, on those shows, we've had some tremendous matches. We've been there for 2 years now, the Portsmouth Guildhall, and we've had some. I would say, was it 1 year? I think it's just over a year now. The August show, the last show we did in August, marks our 1 year stay there. So we're into our 2nd year. But with those shows, we'll have a big family-orientated match, which will be there to draw in the families. But I've got a philosophy that, great wrestling's great wrestling, and you can appreciate it no matter what. Now, I like to think that our shows elsewhere are always suitable for all the family, but, they often, because of the very nature of them, they often draw a very adult-orientated crowd, which is completely fine. But in Portsmouth, we need to entertain those families and bring them in, and Ryback is just an example of that, really. He's the ex-WWE name that everyone knows. We're going to draw a predominantly local crowd. I'm sure there will be some people traveling, but predominantly local crowds who are coming to see the former WWE superstar Ryback. And he's going to be in a great match against Legion of Lords. And as you rightly pointed out, very underrated, specifically Lord Gideon Grey, who I'm sure you're going to be seeing a lot more of, and Rishi Ghosh is an enduring character who's also tremendously underrated as well. But in terms of Gideon Grey, in terms of being a technician in the ring, I think Gideon's probably up there with the best in the country, and I'm talking he could probably go hold for hold with someone like a Zack Sabre Jr. And I'm not just saying that, he really is a tremendous technician, but he's got such a great range, and he's a tremendous character as well. And I think what's so great about him is that people genuinely dislike him and genuinely hate him, and anyone who says he can't wrestle is almost fooled by the character he portrays. And he's a perfect foil. Him and Rishi are the perfect foil to Ryback. And it's going to be a great match, which I'm sure we're going to have loads of families, young children there who are going to have the time of their lives, and they're always going to remember the day they met Ryback. And that's another part of why I love pro wrestling, because we're able to create those moments. And I look back at times when I was able to meet WWE superstars when I was younger, and I look back on those days so fondly, and I've still got the pictures now. And I'm sure that there's going to be so many people on October 30th who go to the Guildhall and get that exact same feeling and reaction, and that's perfect. And seeing the look of appreciation on the parents' faces as well is another very rewarding part of the job. So that's going to be our headline match, but we're also putting on a great undercard, and that's the same philosophy as with the Vader Osprey match. And anytime we do something which is a bit, to get a big draw or to get people talking, it's going to have a great undercard. And what we've found out at these Portsmouth Guildhall shows is that people appreciate great wrestling, and it doesn't matter if it's a family-friendly show or an adult-orientated show. Wrestling is an international language which anyone can understand. So we brought them in with that match, but you're going to get other great matches on the card. And the first match announced was Shane Strickland versus Ryan Smile, which I'm sure is going to be an absolutely great contest. But to put it into perspective, on the same show, I'm trying not to get muddled up, but on the same show we had Carlito as one of the headliners on the show. We had Zack Sabre Jr. versus Timothy Thatcher. How about that for diversity? On the same show, we had PJ Black, Justin Gabriel, just out of WWE. We had AJ Styles versus Mark Haskins. So we just going through a show now that was about to go up on demand in the next couple of days. It was a show which was headlined by Bram versus James Castle in a Bram rules or no disqualification match or whatever have you as a headliner. But we opened up with Pete Dunne against Speedball Mike Bailey. So the shows have they have a real diversity. It's a real, never has a term buffet of style has been more appropriate. But, you know, I'd like to think we're doing our bit for, you know, in Portsmouth, at the very least, you know, we're doing our bit for the future of British wrestling in terms of, you know, bringing through some of the best wrestlers. And I think anyone who's seen the contenders matches and seen the guys coming through, you know, they'll appreciate how fundamentally sound those guys are. And also on these shows, we're creating new fans to the product, and we're creating the future generation of fans, because it's very important that they come from somewhere. You know, and I think that everyone who comes to our Portsmouth shows, I'm hoping, you know, we see regular faces come back again and again and again. And, you know, they're investing in the product, they're buying the DVDs, they're subscribing on demand, and we're creating long-term fans of the product and growing it at a grassroots level. So diversity is key, and also understanding the audience that are going to be there and putting on a show that caters to them, you know, even if it's not to everyone's tastes.
Right on. I like that as an impassioned close too, Andy. You sold me.
Good.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I don't mean to be flippant either. I absolutely agree with you, and I think that's pretty cool what you guys are doing and the way that you're going about doing it. So
yeah, and I completely, and again, like there's no. I don't want to sound like I'm preachy or whatever have you, because everyone's entitled to their opinion, and that's the great thing about wrestling.
Yep.
Wrestling's an art form. It's subjective. Like what I think is a 5-star match, you might think is a 2-star match, or you know, it is very much subjective. And you can look at stuff from the outside, and some people might have seen, you know, like Ryback's come in just off the heels of you know, a Vader show, and everyone might be like, oh, Revolution Pro Wrestling is obviously this freak show promotion, and it may appear like that from the outside, but really if you look closer, it's really not at all.
And like you said, I mean, giving people choices on the show, and you know, as one of the things that we try to do at Cage Side is like you said, that conversation is part of what's fun about wrestling. So as long as we sort of can respectfully have that conversation, it just makes the whole thing a lot more fun. Did we lose you, Andy? I still see his little icon. Uh-oh, Keith. We're going to have to improvise. Well, I think that was a pretty good place to close, though, even if we did lose him.
Well, we should plug where people
absolutely
can buy tickets. So tickets can be bought through, I believe, the Revolution Pro Wrestling website.
Yes, so which I think is revolutionprowrestling.com.
And also follow Revolution Pro Wrestling on Twitter. That's where a lot of the match announcements are made. So they've already announced 4 matches for night 1 of Global Wars UK, and I think 3 for the second night. So it's I think
that's at Rev Pro UK on Twitter.
So it's mid-November on a Thursday and Friday. I'll just check my calendar so we've got the exact dates and times.
And while Keith's doing that, I'll also say I know Andy mentioned it, but it's rpwondemand.com and they've got the Uprising show with the Will Ospreay Vader match on there. Summer Sizzler is up with Sabre Jr. versus Shibata. So there's a lot, like I said at the open, there's a lot of different options for your wrestling dollar, but you know, for 9 months at a time, there's no limited commitment, so you can sign up and watch some of those shows, see what you like, and come back again for Global Wars. And Keith will tell us what days those are.
So Thursday, November the 10th at 7:30 p.m. at York Hall, which Andy mentioned, in Bethnal Green, London. And then they go the next night to the opposite end of London. So there's Global Wars UK Night 2, Friday night, 7:30 p.m. at Walthamstow Assembly Hall in London as well.
Excellent. Andy, are you back?
I'm back. Yeah, sorry, right. I was on my phone and it ran out of battery.
Oh, sorry. We were just plugging all of your stuff, so hopefully we got it. We talked about the streaming service. We gave dates and ticket information for Global Wars. We plugged your Twitter. Is there anything else that you'd like us to get to before?
No, that's it really. Just like I say, just the website and rpwondemand.com. They're the two main things that I'd like to plug. But yeah, that's it. Yeah.
All right, so we've got those in there. Well, thank you again. I mean, it was a great conversation, and hopefully we get some more eyes on the product because, you know, as we said many times throughout here, if the business is healthier overall, it's good for all of us. So.
Absolutely, and thanks very much, guys. And yeah, sorry I lost you at the end there, but hopefully you got everything.
Yep. No worries, and you know, maybe we can touch base with you again, maybe in December after the Global War shows, and see how things are going, or whatever. You know, keep the conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely, anytime, guys.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Andy. Any last words, Keith?
No. Look forward to seeing people at Revolution Pro Wrestling shows in the future and other wrestling shows, maybe closer by.
Sounds good. All right, everybody. Thanks. Bye.